Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is my first case of 2020. I know I haven't done one in a good minute, but I've just been super busy, been super concentrated into my workouts, and then I was taking care of my niece. So yeah, but I'm back with another case, and 2020 I will be bringing out more videos, so please subscribe. Please make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you guys liked it. So anyways, I am moving on into today's case, and I will be talking about Moses Lall and his aunt Lila. So a little information about Moses and his family business. Basically, they were Guyanese natives, and in their country they had a family business where they would export monkeys, reptiles, exotic birds, basically anything that was a wildlife animal. And they decided that they wanted to expand their business, so Moses decided that it would be a great idea for them to, well, for just him and his aunt to go to New York and expand their business out there and maybe open up a shop and run business in New York. So their plan was that Moses would be the one running the business, and his aunt Lila would be the one helping him out, taking care of the birds, making sure they're fed and well taken care of. Lila really did enjoy taking care of the birds. They were so special to her, and she really took pride. So like I said, Moses was in charge of the business side of things, and they decided that it would be a better idea to actually take their business and move to Florida to a bigger property. And Lila also decided that it would be a perfect fit for the animals to be more in their natural habitat and have more nature around them. But a lot of people did say that Moses and Lila weren't the most friendliest people. I guess they were more to themselves, which is okay, I guess. Not everyone is the most friendliest person out there, but for the most part, everyone did say that their business was clean. It was nothing shady. So yeah, they weren't the most friendliest people, but I mean, not everyone is out there, you know. Some people just like to maintain more to themselves, especially if you have a business running all these exotic birds worth so much money. I would feel like you wouldn't really want to be too out there. So in 1993, there was some restrictions on people being able to import exotic birds onto the US, I believe, or into other countries. So that caused them to make Lila responsible for breeding the birds, because that was something that was going to impact their business by not being able to import. So Lila was putting on a new role into her duties, and that was her breeding the birds so they could keep their business up and running and everything would go up to par. Although Lila did love the birds and she loved her job, it was a little bit overwhelming for her, because like I said, she did add one more thing for her to worry about and have to do. So they decided that it would be a good idea to hire a new person to help out in the ranch. So they ended up hiring a person that was a family acquaintance, and his name was Harry. And people who would visit the ranch would say that Harry was a really friendly person. He never seemed like he was a bad person, or they never got any negative energy from him. For the most part, they said that he really seemed like he was part of the family. So by this time, with all the changes happening in their business, money was tight. So Moses wanted to get into the reptile business. So he would travel to Africa every here and there, and he actually ended up meeting this guy named Felix. And Felix was in the reptilian trade business. So obviously that it would interest Moses into bringing him back into the ranch. So Felix went on a visa to Florida, and Moses would hire Felix to work and help out in the ranch as well. So on June 4th of 1994, a guy named Daryl, which was their usual delivery man that would deliver their bird food, showed up at their front gate, and he said that instantly when he got there, something was weird. He said that first of all, he was always greeted at the gate, and the gate was closed and locked, which was super unusual because they already knew the day he would come and deliver the food. So he decided, I'm gonna jump the gate and maybe I'll find them in the back with the birds or someone, because in total there was 4 people. It was Lila, Moses, Felix, and Harry. So he jumped the gate and he started walking towards the back, and that's where they had all the birds in their cages. So once he's in the back, he doesn't see anyone, which is very unusual. If Moses wasn't around, Lila was always the one that was present. So he found it a little strange, but he didn't think too much of it because, like I said, Lila was always very attentive to the birds. So he assumed he'd be back and he would just drop off the food nearby the gate and he would come back on another day. So when the delivery guy does come back, he realizes that the bird food, the bags, are still right at the gate where he had left them off. And he found that really strange because by that time they would have been down to their last bag of food, as they always would. So he was a bit confused and didn't know what to do. And I believe word started getting out that, as far as everyone knew, there was no one at the ranch and no one was taking care of the birds. So by that time the word got out and everyone was concerned about the birds. So there isn't much detail really onto certain things of the case, but word started getting out. I don't know how, but people started to find out that there were birds in Moses and Lila's ranch that seemed like they were abandoned and they needed to be fed. Now, due to the fact that Moses and Lila were not the most friendliest people seemed to be more concerned about the birds than obviously Moses and Lila. So people right away took it upon themselves and took action, and they decided to reach for the Florida Fish and Game Conservation Commission and try to get them involved. But since Moses and Lila's business was not registered, or they didn't have a license for it, they decided that they didn't want to get involved. Basically, their calls were being ignored. So their next step was to get in contact with the police, and their response was to call the animal control. So basically everyone's hands were tied and there was not much that they were being able to do because they were asking for help and no one was willing to help them out. So by this time it is Wednesday, June 15, and the delivery guy Daryl shows up as usual. And when he shows up again, the bags of food are still in the same place where he left them, and he would have never imagined what he was going to walk into, but he decided again that he would jump the fence and see what's going on and see how the birds are. When he does start to walk towards the back of the property, what he ends up finding was extremely insane and sad. He ended up finding a whole lot of birds dead on the bottom of the cage. A lot of them were feeding off of each other, and the birds that were already dead, they were also eating those birds, and they were screaming, and I'm sure they were starving, obviously. And he was just extremely shocked to have found the birds dead and starving. Like I said, these birds were super expensive birds. I believe they said that they were worth up to $700,000. So this was really alarming. So then finally the Florida Fish and Game Commission decides to get involved after they have been telling them to try to find out if they could go into the property. It's like now they decided to come when all these birds were dead. Like, it's insane. But anyways, they ended up getting involved. They showed up at the property, and when they arrived, they saw 400 birds, exotic birds, dead, and 300 of them clinging on to life. And right there and then they knew that there was something serious in their hands that they had to deal with. News about the birds, or the ranch in general, spread, and all these people wanted to come and help out. people that were vets, that were bird experts. So they wanted to see if there was anything that they could possibly do to help them out, and to try to see if they could also save the remaining birds that were almost dead. Now, while all of this is happening, it's funny because no one ever cared to ask about Moses and Lila. No one ever questioned anything about them. Like I said, their concern was the birds, to try to save the birds that were alive. But no one decided, hey, this is kind of weird. Like I said, that's why it kind of sucked that they didn't really have any relationship or friendships with people outside of their ranch, because people kind of know your routine life. Once they get to know you, they know the type of person that you are. And obviously at this point, it's really hard for people to pinpoint, like, okay, well, they would have never left the ranch. For all they knew was, I don't know, people were not even thinking about them. That's what I'm saying. So people were more concerned about the birds, which is obviously at that point the thing that most people should be concerned about. But that all changed until a detective decided to follow up on the case and see what was really going on. So as soon as he started working on the case, he couldn't help to think about the worth of these exotic birds, and whoever was running this ranch, why would they decide to leave their investment behind? Like I said, these birds were worth so much money. Now, once he started to ask around to people who were somewhat familiar with Moses and Lila and the ranch, he ended up discovering that people that lived there was obviously Moses, Lila, Harry, and Felix. And people did mention also that Moses would take trips to Africa very often, so he would be back and forth between the ranch and Africa. So he was thinking to himself, okay, well, Moses might be in Africa, where's Lila and the rest of the two men? Mostly everyone that he spoke to did say that Lila was very devoted to the birds, so they found it a bit strange that she would leave them unattended, or that she wouldn't be around to feed the birds. That's when the homicide detective determined that there was more to this case than just some people leaving their ranch behind and not caring about their animals. He started to kind of get a feeling that they most likely left unwillingly. So while he was at the ranch, he decided to look around the property and go inside their house to see if maybe there was any clues and any struggle. So when they do go inside the house, they find the house basically empty. It was not furnished, and the only things that were in the house was a mattress and a bunch of dirty dishes in the sink. But he couldn't determine if there was a sign of a struggle. Like I said, there was no furniture, there was no couches, nothing. So that left him with basically no clues, because if there was a struggle, you would be able to see stuff being knocked down to the floor. He walked into the bathroom, everything seemed perfectly normal. So the detective decides that he's gonna file a missing person for Lila, and he decides to get in contact with Lila's sister. So when the detective starts to speak to Lila's sister, again, Moses' mother, he explains to her what is going on the ranch, and she starts to tell him that there is no way Lila would never leave the birds unattended or the ranch, and that if she is nowhere to be found, she is most likely dead. She continues to say that if Moses was ever not around, Lila was always on the ranch working, looking after the birds and the property. And she actually mentions that the last time that she spoke to her son, Moses, that she ended up calling him on June 3rd. And when she spoke to him, she noticed that her son was uneasy. He didn't sound like himself, and he sounded a bit stressed out and worried. And he said that he would be going to Africa to try to see if he would be able to buy any reptiles. Again, he did want to get into the reptile business, so that was his reason to going to Africa. And she said that after that, she did try to get a hold of Moses and Lila, but the phone calls would just keep ringing and ringing and no one would pick up the phone. So she found that a bit strange, but she figured maybe they were busy feeding the birds or, you know, out in the property. So certain people did start to say that Moses owed people money, and money that was for unpaid loans. But Moses' mother said that there was no way that he would go and borrow people's money, because anytime that he was in need of anything that was financial or anything regarding the family business, his first phone call would be his mom, and she would be the one always sending them money or if they needed anything regarding the business. And I do feel like that may have been a lie, because again, people did say that Moses and Lila were the not most friendliest people. So I feel like for someone to not be so friendly to go and ask people for loans or for money, that would be a little strange. So I feel like his mother is right, and most certainly that was a complete lie. If you guys hear any dogs barking in the background, those are my dogs, so please ignore that and bear with me. But anyways, the detective does start to wonder about the two other men that were living with Moses and Lila, which were the two men that were hired to help out in the property. So while trying to find information on Harry and Felix, he does realize that about 1.5 years ago, police were called to the ranch, and when the police did arrive there, they were told that Harry was trying to commit suicide because I guess he had a thing for Lila, and Lila respectfully did not want anything with him, and he was claiming that he was going to hurt himself because Lila did not want anything to do with him. He also ended up finding out that Harry was stealing money from Moses, or he stole about $29,000 from Moses, and Moses ended up finding out. So they had a big issue between them two, and I believe Harry ended up leaving the ranch and taking the money that he had stole from Moses. And Moses did end up getting his money back, or at least most of it, and he promised Harry that he would not press any charges on him unless he returned back into the ranch to work for him, because according to people, Moses really needed Harry's help. So they exchanged their deal, I guess, and Harry returned back into the ranch to continue to help the family out. So with all this information, the detective did end up putting a be on the lookout for Harry, as he wanted to question him and talk to him to see if he knew more about everything that had happened with Moses and Lila. Meanwhile, Moses' mother does arrive to Florida, and as soon as she gets there, she goes to the police department and starts to talk to them, and she tells them that she has been trying to get a hold of them, as she had told the homicide detective. She was telling them that she was unable to get any callbacks or anyone to pick up the phone, and she mentions again that the phone, every time she would call, the phone would just keep ringing and ringing, and she asks if they coincidentally have checked the property to see if any wires have been cut, any phone wires, and they replied to her saying no, we actually have not, but they decided that it would be a good idea to go and check for themselves to see if maybe her theory was correct. And what do you know, as soon as they get to the property, they start to check the wires, and the wires were actually cut from the phone lines. So right there and then they knew something was completely wrong. They knew foul play was involved. So this case couldn't get any more crazier than that, and they had no idea where Moses and Lila were. So they started to just really put in the work and try to find out anything that they could. And police also end up filing a missing person report for Moses. So at this point, Moses and Lila were reported missing, and they had zero information on them. And since Moses' mother was in Florida, they let her go into the property and kind of let her take a look to see if there was anything maybe that she found that was a little odd or strange, or anything that was missing. As soon as she got to the property, she tells the detectives if they took the vans that were in the property. And the detective said, well, how is he supposed to know if he has zero information about anything regarding Moses and Lila? And that's when she tells them they had a white van and the van is missing. So if you guys didn't take it, then obviously whoever was involved in any wrongdoing with Moses and Lila, they must have the van. That's when they decided to put a be on the lookout for this white van. And it actually doesn't take them too long before they already have a hit. And they actually had stopped a guy that was on the side of the road, stranded, with a flat tire with the same exact van that Moses' mother was describing. So being protocol, the police officer does tell the guy if he can see some identification. And when he does, he notices that the person that was stranded was Moses Lall. And his identification, his driver license, was suspended. So he had to arrest him and take him into custody. But he was then released, and I believe he bailed himself out because his excuse was that his birds were in the van and he needed to feed the birds and the turtles, and they let him go. So when they tell Moses' mother about the news that they found Moses and he was on the side of the road, she right away says there is no way that that is Moses, and if it is Moses, it has to just be his identification and somebody else trying to use his ID. So while police are investigating, they actually come across Felix, and they end up questioning him, asking him if he knows anything about what happened in the ranch and if he knows the whereabouts of Moses and Lila. Felix claims that on June 4th, he was in New York and got a call from Harry saying while he was at the ranch, he witnessed Lila and Moses being taken away at gunpoint by some men that were masked. And the detectives found it weird how they did not dare to contact police, especially if Harry was so in love with Lila. Why did he not bother to call police right there and then when he found out that someone was taking them at gunpoint? And while they are talking to Felix, they also mentioned to him that if he knows when was the last time that he had spoken to Moses and Lila. And he actually said that the last time he spoke to them and saw them was the day before he went to New York, which happened to be about 3 days before the abduction had happened. The detective ended up getting a copy of fingerprints and a Polaroid picture of the man claiming to be Moses, and they right away ask Moses' mother if she's able to identify the person in the picture, and she right away identifies the man as not being Moses but instead Harry. So then police right away end up being on the hunt for Harry, and they also go back to Moses and Lila's property to see if maybe they are buried on their property, and they end up having to search a pond that was near their property as well to see if maybe they might be inside the pond. And they send in professional divers and they end up finding nothing. So basically the story ends up with Moses and Lila still being missing. They have not been found. None of their personal belongings, no piece of clothing that they were wearing that day or their whereabouts have been found. I honestly believe that at this point Harry has a lot to do with it. I know that he probably says he didn't do it, but his actions show that he knows more than he's telling. And police did end up getting a tip in 2011, and they ended up saying that someone that was under a different name but looked a lot like Harry was working for, I think, this company or this, I don't know exactly what it was, but he was working under a different name. And when police ended up showing up to the place, it just so happened that Harry had left 4 minutes earlier before the police had arrived. So he knows that police are ready to arrest him when they find him. And basically at this point, everything points to Harry knowing where they are and or whatever happened to them. To be honest, I don't even think that they're alive. Like I said, this case was a case that was such a long time ago. I feel like by now, if they were alive, we would have known something. But no one has ever found out what happened to Moses and Lila. This is honestly such a sad story. Just the fact that Moses and Lila were trying to do something out of their family business and expand it and trying to earn a living off of what they loved, to have someone just come and take it all away from them and possibly could have taken their lives. It's really sad, and it just makes you think that it's always good to not be so out there and trust people. If Harry had stolen money from Moses before, why did Moses feel the need to bring him back into the ranch? Just little things like that. I feel like he should have not allowed Harry to come back. You just can't trust people after they steal from you or they just prove you that they're dishonest people. So that is the end of the story. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully we're able to find answers to Moses and Lila after years and years. But even if a case goes cold, there's always a possibility of a new lead coming in. So that will be the end of this case. Like always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys on my next video. Bye guys.